Welcome, my friends, to another edition of More Bad News, brought to you as always by Camel Cigarettes. Take the Camels Challenge, smoke Camels for 30 days, and see for yourself why more doctors smoked Camels than any other cigarette. Well, my friends, it's been another week of very bad news. The new semester got off to a great start with UNC students jumping out of windows and University of Michigan computer system coming crashing down because of a cyber attack. And 3 people were murdered at a Dollar General in Jacksonville, proving once again that if there was one thing that Black people learned from slavery, it was how to be the innocent victims of white racism. But for me, the big story last week appeared in the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists. Since December of 1945, the Bulletin has been tracking the threat of thermonuclear war and other threats to human survival with a doomsday clock, which is currently at 90 seconds to midnight. Last week, they reprinted a story from the Canadian National Observer, which brings home the point that we like to emphasize here at the show. As I said last week, we are on the toboggan slide to hell. The collapse of our civilization and the extinction of our species is now carved in stone. The article was titled "Managed to Death: How Canada Turned Its Forests into a Carbon Bomb." And there were charts which bring home the concept of tipping points and also where we are today. And I think what I want to do is just share my screen here for a moment and show you how that works here. So here it is. This is the 1990, and the Canadian forests were absorbing more carbon. Here's zero. They were absorbing more carbon, and they were actually at what we call a sink. And then in about 2003, we reached the tipping point. And from that point on, the CO2 emitted by the forest was greater than the CO2 absorbed by the forest. And it has gone straight through the roof. Now, so this, by the way, represents about 3 times the amount of carbon that all of Canada's industrial fossil fuel consumption produces in terms of carbon. So that Canada's forests are now much, much more significant in terms of global climate change than any of Canada's industrial combustion. How far can this go? Well, so here's the tip of the iceberg that has burned so far. That's 3 times the amount that Canada, and by the way, we're talking about an entire year. So the fire season that started in March and has 3 or 4 months yet to go is still burning wildly, has already emitted 3 times more carbon than all of Canada's production in a year. And this is what remains to burn. So, I mean, it makes it pretty clear that our situation is absolutely hopeless. And we here is the point, that these fires are also burning in Spain, Italy, Greece, Turkey, and the Arctic. The Amazon fires. Amazon has already reached a tipping point where the Amazon is emitting more carbon than it's absorbing. So this brings us to where we are. And in 1920, Sigmund Freud introduced the concept of thanatos, the death instinct, in his essay Beyond the Pleasure Principle. And Freud hypothesized that humans must be driven towards death and destruction. He came to this conclusion after witnessing the horrors of World War I. All of the magnificent achievements of a century of scientific and industrial progress led to destruction. So the collapse of our civilization is not a natural process. This isn't like an asteroid that strikes the Earth and takes out the dinosaurs. This is humans destroying their own environment. Last week, there was an editorial in the New York Times entitled, "It's No Longer Possible to Escape What We Have Done to Ourselves." And the Canadian author writes that might this cataclysmic summer be a turning point? My friend Aviva Cantor, who sent me a copy of the editorial, commented, "Dream on." And here's the point. The more cataclysmic the reality, the less likely we as a species will be able to respond. Our civilization is collapsing. That means that our healthcare systems are collapsing, our educational systems are collapsing, our media is completely fragmented. The truth is no longer something that can be agreed upon, and global unified effort is really no longer possible. So you take a look at what's happening in Israel and the United States, our politics have also passed a tipping point. There's no longer any possibility of compromise. It's not that our democracy, it's not that our democracy is collapsing, it's our civilization, our sanity, our sense of what's possible. Our civilization is collapsing because we are witnessing the most rapid and complete extinction in the history of this planet. Remember, folks, everything we ever thought we knew with absolute certainty has turned out to be completely false. The reality that we want to avoid is that our situation is hopeless. Kafka had it right. There's plenty of hope, just none for us. And here's the point that we need to grasp. We have always thought that our destiny was in our own hands. But one look at the Canadian wildfires and the Amazonian wildfires, the Arctic wildfires, and it becomes clear that our demise has nothing at all to do with how much carbon we are now pumping into the atmosphere. As I've said before, even if we reduced our emissions to zero, the wildfires will continue to burn. It's time for humanity's obituary. Well, that's enough for this week. We'll be back next week, hopefully. Please take care. Remember, the pandemic is still raging. And so hopefully I'll be back next week with another edition of more bad news.